Hello, quilting friends. It's me, Tracy from So Supportive. I hope that you are having a wonderful week. I am doing something a little bit different this week. I'm very excited to be participating in the Quilting 101 Back to Basics Sew Along for 2026. This was started by Donna from Handmade by Yang, and there are just oodles of really great quilters who are creating content each week. And we are making 10.5-inch blocks, and this is my block for today that I'm going to show you how to do. If you've never done a disappearing block, this is super fun. This one is a disappearing 4-patch, and I feel like it's the starter disappearing block. You can get more and more complex with cutting up different blocks, but this will should give you the basic idea of what a disappearing block is and what you do and how you sew it together. And I'll even be giving you some tips on pressing and nesting seams. So join me as I show you how to make this adorable disappearing 4-patch. All right, I have 2 pieces of fabric here, and I am aligning them up with the edge. Now this edge looks pretty clean, but I'm going to show you how to clean up the edge if you need to. You're just going to make sure that you cut enough off that you've got a fresh, clean edge right there, so that as we're cutting this way, we're more accurate. Now, the edges here and here aren't incredibly straight, so I'm just going to align this one up along the edge here so that it's pretty accurate. And then I'm going to come over here to the 6-inch line. I need a 6 1/4 inch. So I'm going to use the little tick mark here that measures 1/4 inch past 6. Now take your time here and make sure that you are perfectly lined up along here. It looks pretty good. All right. Always better to take time before you make your cut. I'm going to put this aside. Now, especially the beginning of this block is a really basic block, but once we actually get going with the disappearing part of this block, we have to be super careful with the way that we cut it. So, and the way that we shift the fabric. So we are going to, once again, align. I make sure that we're along a straight line there, and then I'm going to clean up the edge again. Okay. All right. Now we're going to move over once again to that 6 1/4 inch line right here. We're going to make sure that we're straight along the bottom right here. And we've got our first cut, and then I'm going to shift over again and carefully put down the ruler and make a second cut. Now this part will go in my scrap bin. And now we have got the beginnings of our 4-patch. So our squares are ready to go. We are going to align them like this. Put one on top of the other like this. And we are going to sew 1/4 inch down this seam right here. And I'll bring you over to the sewing machine so you can see what happens next. All right, I have clips here. You can also use pins if you prefer. Just make sure that the fabrics haven't shifted at all. And maybe use would use probably 2 pins on this length, but you can use whatever makes you feel comfortable. All right, so I've got my 1/4 inch foot set up here. You can set your stitch length to a 2.5 or maybe a 3 millimeter stitch length. And away we go. I'm aligning the edge of the fabric up with the guide on my foot so that I'm staying on my 1/4 inch. There's also a mark down here that I can eyeball and make sure that I'm keeping my fabric nice and straight. I pause when I take out the pins or the clips. I'll show you the exact same thing with pins. I feed this into the foot. Now you can backstitch there. With this block, I'm not really so worried about backstitching though. All right, I'm going to take it and press it. I'm going to put the darker fabric, which is this one, on the top so that it presses over to this side. Okay, I've got both of my 2 patches pressed towards the darker fabric, and I've got them in position. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this part here and match it up with this part here. So this is called nesting a seam, and that's why we press towards one side. You can also press this open if you want, but the most important part of the 4 patch is making sure that these nest very beautifully. So I usually sort of wiggle it in like so, and then I put a pin there to make sure that it's going to stay. Now do that very carefully because you can push the fabric out of alignment. Now I'm going to add just another pin on either side so that it's a little easier to get through the machine. I'm good with smaller pieces going through without a pin, but larger pieces I feel more comfortable pinning. All right, and we'll do exactly the same thing. On this one, I'm actually going to back stitch. I'm just going to take about 3 stitches and then hit my back stitch button, and just to make sure that that seam doesn't come undone later. And as you can see, I just pull out the pins as I come to them. I'm pulling out this one a little bit early because it did shift slightly. And I'm going to back stitch again right here. You can go forward again if you like. All right, let's see how we did. Ooh, very good. Okay, so you can see how we just want that to look really nice. All right, now you can meet me over at the cutting board. Okay, so here is our perfect 4 patch, which you can use in any quilt using any size squares. However, we are going to make this block disappear. So I am getting out my rotating cutting mat, which rotates to make it a little bit easier on myself. I'm going to put my block right in the center, and then maybe I'll use, actually, instead of using my large one, I'm going to use this smaller ruler. That is a 2.5 inch size, and we are going to align it on this center seam. And I'm going to measure 2 inches over from that center seam. And I am going to make my first cut. Now, it was my habit to pull that away, but I don't want to pull it away. I actually want to rotate it. All right, now we're going to do the exact same thing on this side of the seam. I know it seems like it's a crazy thing to do, but it's really sort of fun. Wow, I shifted. Okay, so if that happens, what you're going to do is you're just going to pat it and make sure that it stays together. I'm not sure if that went up or down. Drat. All right, we're just going to carefully push it back, just like so. And we are going to rotate again. All right. Grabbing the ruler. It's a little nerve-wracking to do this, especially when you're filming it. But it's really not that scary. All right, and then this is the final turn. And I'm gonna line it up again carefully. Hold it down. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna make sure that I got all the edges. That's the tricky part when, okay, we're good. All right, so what we are going to do is we are going to take these 4 center blocks and rotate them. We want to alternate blue and white, so that's how you know that you're doing it right. Okay, and now I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and sew the rows together. Okay, I brought my entire rotating cutting mat over to my sewing machine, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew these together one at a time using a 1/4 inch seam. We are doing this exactly as we did before. I'm going to take each piece, make sure that it's aligned correctly, and run it through the machine. I am going to take a little back stitch just to make sure it doesn't come undone at the edge. And as I come to the edge of that one, I am going to get the next piece ready. Just make sure that they're aligned well. The middle piece I'm not so concerned about back stitching because that one is actually going to have the seams encased. But when I know it's an outside edge, I'm going to just make sure that it's not going to come undone. All right, I'm going to take this over to the iron, and I'm going to alternate which way that I press the seams. I am going to press this one that way so that the seam is going that way. This one I'm going to press so that the seam is going that way. And this bottom one I'm going to do the same as the top. That will make sure that I can nest these pieces together. Okay, I've set these back down on the mat, and what we're going to do now is I'm going to do exactly the same thing, except I'm flipping these over here and stitching them down, making sure this seam right here nests so that it comes out nice and perfect like that. And I'll be right back when those are done. Okay, now we are going to do the exact same thing, but we are going to put the rows together now. I'm going to make sure that both this side and this side nest nicely and go from there. I just realized that this one isn't pressed correctly, so I think I'm going to flip one of those to the opposite side, probably this one, so that that center seam will also nest. Okay, I'm back. All right, so I'm going to make sure that all three of these seams right here nest nicely. I'm going to push those two together. I'm going to push these two together right here. And sometimes a clip is also good for this because it doesn't push it. And put another one right there. All right, and then I am going to stitch that and I'll be right back. Okay, we've got the top stitch together. I'm going to take the bottom and do exactly the same thing. Pin these parts together. Actually, I'm going to fix this right here because that also is pressed to the wrong side. And then pin this together, and then I'll be right back when we're all done. Here is our beautiful finished block. And this is what the seams look like on the back when you press like that. Like I said, you can also press open if you prefer, but I just find it to be helpful, especially to get nice crisp corners, to press to one side and then nest the seams. And I think this block came out really great. This is perfect for using up fat quarters at this size. However, if you want to use up a layer cake, that would work as well. I'm going to drop a link below to a website that has all of the different size blocks that you would like and what size you need to cut your initial squares to. I also made a test block that I used some purples. I used 2 different purple squares and some white as the background, and that's how it came out. I think it looks super pretty. You can also just do this with scrappy fabric and mix and match to your heart's content. I think that this block is super fun, and I hope you enjoyed this video.